Jeff Bezos, the richest man on Earth, a man who built Amazon into a global empire and launched rockets to the edge of space, never imagined that the greatest threat to his power would come from the woman sitting beside him, the glamorous Sanchez. But insiders whisper that what began as a love story wrapped in luxury yachts and red carpet photos may have turned into the most shocking betrayal in billionaire history. Whispers started quietly in Wall Street trading rooms, hushed voices asking why Amazon stock was moving in strange, unexplained patterns. At first, analysts dismissed it, thinking it was just another billionaire shifting his fortune. But then documents leaked, files stamped with Bezos, initials, transaction codes, times, dates. And suddenly the story turned darker because those documents pointed not to Wall Street rivals or regulators, but to Lauren herself. Reports claimed she had quietly moved billions of dollars worth of Bezos's personal shares without his direct knowledge. $3 billion gone overnight, as if evaporated into thin air. Imagine the scene in Bezos's private Seattle estate. The glow of monitors in the midnight hours. Financial advisors rushing into his office, pale-faced, whispering about a transaction. They could not explain Bezos frozen, staring at the screen, his empire slipping through his hands until fury broke the silence. Insiders say he slammed the desk so hard the glass cracked, muttering over and over, "How could she do this to me? This wasn't just money. It was identity, control, legacy, the foundation of everything he built." And the betrayal cut deeper, because he did not learn from her. He learned from a leak, a file that landed in the hands of advisors before he ever heard a word from the woman he trusted. Humiliation, that is the word. His inner circle repeats humiliation at a scale he never expected to face. And while Bezos seethed, Lauren was calm, collected some whispers. She wanted leverage, a war chest protection in case their relationship collapsed. Others whisper it was revenge. Years of living in his shadow, finally boiling over. One friend allegedly said she wanted freedom, and freedom cost money. Freedom to the tune of $3 billion. And as the scandal spread, the media smelled blood. Headlines blared secret stock sale rocks. Bezos' fortune was Amazon's empire unraveling. Was the richest man alive suddenly outplayed in his own home hedge fund? Managers debated on calls. One warning: if Lauren could pull this off, then maybe Bezos was no longer in control. Maybe she was. And that chilling thought rattled investors. Because if Bezos could not control his household, how could he control Amazon itself? The whispers grew louder in the weeks after the first leak. Hedge fund managers whispered behind closed doors. Traders stared at their screens, puzzled at the strange disappearance of billions of dollars from Jeff Bezos's personal fortune. Amazon stock was moving in ways that defied logic, slipping off the grid in massive chunks. No announcements, no official memos, just silent transfers, as if someone had pulled strings in the dark, and insiders began to suspect this was not random. This was orchestrated. The first real clue came when an anonymous envelope landed on a financial desk in New York. No name, no return address, only a single flash drive inside, marked with nothing but the initials JB and a series of time-stamped numbers. When analysts opened it, they found files encrypted but traceable patterns emerging once decoded, showing sale after sale, carefully hidden, routed through offshore accounts. Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. Every move deliberate, every step precise. This was not a billionaire casually shifting wealth. This was a chess match. Someone who understood the markets with surgical precision. One Wall Street trader compared it to a military operation, so clean, so calculated that without the leak, no one would have noticed. And at the center of it all, whispers pointed to Lauren Sanchez, the glamorous woman who only months before had been celebrated for floating on yachts with Bezos, for smiling beside him at Hollywood parties, for riding on his rocket ship to the edge of space. Now her name was being linked to coded transactions, secret meetings, and encrypted calls. Insiders whispered that Lauren had been planning this for months, meeting quietly in Beverly Hills hotels where she slipped into private rooms guarded by discreet staff. One alleged sighting placed her with a former Goldman Sachs strategist known for guiding billionaires through ruthless divorces. Another insider swore she was seen with a shadow advisor whose reputation in Wall Street circles was whispered like a ghost. A man who knew how to cover tracks and bury transactions under layers of offshore shells. These meetings, according to insiders, were not casual. They were war councils, whispers of encrypted calls, timed to avoid suspicion, bouncing through foreign servers, messages allegedly containing chilling words like, "He thinks he owns everything, but he does not see me coming." And while these whispers spread through financial circles, Bezos himself was spiraling. Insiders described his mood inside the Medina estate in Seattle as darker than ever. Staff members heard him pacing through the night, muttering about betrayal, muttering about enemies hiding in plain sight. He called in his advisors, demanding explanations, demanding loyalty. But even they could not give him answers. The numbers were undeniable. Billions had moved, and the trail seemed to point to the woman closest to him. The confrontation, insiders say, happened just after midnight. Bezos stormed into his living room, papers in hand, his face red with fury. Lauren sat quietly sipping wine, calm, almost smug. One insider said she seemed to know what was coming. Bezos slammed the papers onto the marble counter and shouted, "3 billion. Lauren, 3 billion. Do you even understand what you have done?" And in that moment, she did not flinch. She stared at him, cool, unbothered, which only drove his rage further, and then came the leaked audio. A 47-second clip whispered through elite circles before it hit the press. Bezos's voice furious and cracked under pressure, screaming, "You sabotaged me. This is not just money. This is power, my empire, my name." And in the background, Lauren's voice, calm, sharp, cutting through, like a knife saying your empire. "Jeff, you act like it belongs to you alone. Maybe it is time you realized it doesn't." Insiders who heard the tape said it was chilling. Bezos sounded panicked, cornered, broken. Not the robotic CEO who once controlled every corner of Amazon, but a man betrayed in his own home staff said the fight raged for hours, voices echoing through the halls, doors slamming, accusations flying. Bezos accused her of dismantling everything he built from the inside, of plotting with outsiders, of scheming with rivals. Lauren's response, cold and sharp. "No, Jeff, not dismantling, freeing myself from you," and those words, insiders say, broke him because they were not words of apology. They were words of war by morning. Bezos had locked himself in his study, calling lawyers, financial advisors, even old rivals, demanding strategies, demanding vengeance. One staffer claimed he repeated again and again, "She is against me. She is against me," like a mantra. And when word of the fight leaked out, Wall Street shook even harder. Hedge fund managers openly debated if this was not just financial, but personal, emotional warfare. One warned, if Lauren is bold enough to touch his billions, then she holds leverage bigger than money. She holds his weakness. Because if the richest man in the world could be blindsided at home, then what does that mean for his empire? What does it mean for Amazon, for Blue Origin, for the perception of control that underpinned it all? And perception was everything. Because as soon as the scandal hit headlines, Bezos looked different. Cameras caught him in New York stepping out of a black SUV. Shoulders, slumped eyes, tired. Tabloids screamed, "Bezos on the brink, the richest man alive," looking broken while across the country, Lauren appeared radiant in Beverly Hills, dressed in designer gowns, smiling effortlessly, sliding into limos, laughing with friends, no trace of stress, no hint of scandal. She looked untouchable, and that contrast fueled whispers that she was winning the optics war. One Hollywood insider said bluntly, "She looks like the victor. He looks like the casualty," and perception began to shift because while Bezos built rockets and corporations, Lauren built narratives. She leaned into Hollywood. Allies, celebrity voices, podcasts, tabloids. Her image crafted not as a schemer, but as a woman breaking free from the shadow of control. One insider claimed she even sought out Joe Rogan, dining with him and a political strategist in Los Angeles. Conversations described as conspiratorial, intense, like plotting a media strike, a campaign to flip public opinion. Bezos has money, but Lauren has influence, said one insider, and influence in Hollywood can be worth more than billions. Meanwhile, Bezos turned to the one man no one expected. Elon Musk sources say Bezos, desperate for advice, picked up the phone and called his rival, the man who mocked his rockets, the man who called his empire pathetic in the space race. Musk reportedly laughed when he heard the storytelling. Bezos, "So Lauren outplayed you, huh? Welcome to the club, Jeff. The empire always crumbles from the inside," and Bezos, furious, whispered back, "This is not over. Elon, I need to know how you would strike." Musk's response, cold, brutal control. The narrative make her look reckless, hit her where it hurts public opinion, and Bezos listened, his fury turning into calculation. But Lauren was already ahead. Insiders say she had been planning not just a stock move, but a perception war. She smiled. At Paparazzi, she joked to reporters she played the part of a woman unfazed, while Bezos crumbled into paranoia. Insiders said he spent hours replaying the leaked audio of their fight, muttering about betrayal, demanding daily reports on her movements, her meetings, her Instagram posts. One staffer whispered he feels like he is losing control, and when Bezos feels out of control, that is when things get dangerous. Because he began preparing not just emotionally but legally. Whispers say he assembled a war room of lawyers, the kind who charge $1 million just to take a meeting, their mission to destroy Lauren with the one weapon sharper than his wealth. The lawsuits over unauthorized sales, claims of betrayal of trust, whispers even of corporate sabotage. Insiders say he wanted to remind her and the world that no one undermines Jeff Bezos without consequences. But Lauren was not backing down, spotted again in Los Angeles, radiant, laughing as if nothing had happened. One paparazzi asked about Bezos, and she smiled, saying, "Oh, don't worry, I always play fair." Her words echoing through tabloids, while insiders said behind the scenes she was calling witnesses, gathering Hollywood connections, preparing her own legal strike, and whispers of a prenup loophole began to surface, a vague clause buried deep in their contracts, so vague it could swing billions depending on how a court interpreted it. One lawyer called it a ticking time bomb, and if Lauren played it right, she could take not just stock, not just property, but leverage over Blue Origin itself. Bezos spiraled deeper, convinced Lauren had allies, political operatives, Wall Street rivals, maybe even foreign investors feeding her strategy. He ordered his team to dig. Through emails, phone logs, even security footage, he wanted to smoke them out. But every move only made him look weaker to the outside world, and Lauren kept thriving, the richest man alive, unraveling in public, while the woman accused of betrayal looked untouchable, unstoppable. Insiders warned this was no longer about money, this was about power, about control, about survival. And the question now was, who would strike first, Bezos with his billions, and his army of lawyers, or Lauren with her? Influence her allies and the secrets she held close, because if the whispers were true, this was not just a breakup. This was a war. And the fallout could tear down more than a relationship. It could shake the empire of the richest man alive. As the whispers grew louder, Wall Street was no longer the only arena where the betrayal of Jeff Bezos played out, because the scandal began seeping into Silicon Valley boardrooms, Washington power circles, and even Hollywood galas. Suddenly everyone wanted to know the truth about Lauren Sanchez, the woman who seemed to hold not only the heart of the richest man alive, but perhaps the keys to his fortune. And insiders described the way Bezos moved during those weeks as a man consumed every step. Taken with paranoia, every meeting shadowed by the thought that someone was laughing behind his back. Some say he stopped trusting his closest advisors, fearing that even they might be compromised after all if Lauren could reach into his accounts. Without warning, then who else could penetrate the walls he thought were ironclad? Meanwhile, Lauren projected calm at charity galas. She glided across the floor, dazzling cameras and gowns shimmering under flashbulbs, and every photo carried a question. Was she smiling as a partner or as a conqueror? The whispers suggested she already had her own network, media contacts ready to run stories on her terms, political connections through climate summits, and Hollywood allies who admired her boldness. Some even called her a modern Cleopatra, weaving power and beauty into a weapon that could destabilize an empire. The financial side deepened too. Regulators began sniffing around unusual stock movements, tracing shell companies and offshore accounts. And while nothing was confirmed, the timing aligned too perfectly with Lauren's movements overseas. A trip to Monaco here, a quiet dinner in London there, each step coinciding with millions shifting through the global system. Bezos himself began to unravel. Staffers recalled his temper flaring over trivial mistakes, his once robotic discipline cracking under the weight of doubt and humiliation. But the question that haunted him most was not about money, it was about loyalty. Did she ever love him? Or was the entire romance a grand strategy to secure the kind of wealth and power no Hollywood career could ever deliver? Friends recall late-night calls from Bezos, desperate, repeating the same phrase, "I cannot lose control, I cannot let this define me." But already it was defining him, because the richest man alive had been turned into a symbol of vulnerability. If Bezos could be betrayed, then no one was safe. Journalists circled hungry for the next leak, paparazzi staked outside, their yachts hoping to catch a glance of the couple, and in every image the narrative shifted. Once he was the titan of tech, the master of space. Now he was the man who might have been outplayed by love itself, and Lauren stood at the center of it. All a woman who walked from TV anchor desks to the heart of the global elite, and perhaps even further into history as the woman who cracked the armor of Jeff Bezos. The storm only deepened when word leaked that private investigators had begun circling the story, digging into flight logs, bank transfers, and encrypted messages, because once suspicion reached that level, there was no way to keep it quiet any longer. The empire that Bezos had built with code warehouses and rockets now found itself entangled with tabloids, whispers, and lawyers, and those closest to him said he began moving differently, less like the unstoppable visionary, and more like a man who sensed predators at every corner. Some insiders suggested that Lauren herself had been feeding the machine carefully, orchestrating which details reached which journalists, always enough to spark headlines, but never enough to end the narrative, and this drip feed kept the world hooked because every week there was a new twist, a new hint, a new shadow on the wall. But what terrified Bezos most was that Wall Street did not react the way he expected. Investors did not rally behind him instead. They quietly speculated in back rooms about succession plans, about whether a man so distracted could continue running one of the largest companies in history. And meanwhile, Lauren appeared untouchable. She still appeared at galas, smiling still, mingled with royalty still posed on the decks of yachts as if the headlines were not daggers but diamonds. Each scandal seemed to polish her image rather than crack it. Her story transformed from an anchor woman who once read scripts to a woman who now seemed to write them herself. But beneath that glamour was something darker. Insiders spoke of allies she had cultivated over decades, from Hollywood producers to political fixers to financiers in Dubai and Monaco, and some said this was no romance at all, but a chess game played on the highest board in existence. Bezos may have been the richest man in the world, but wealth is only power if you control it. And the whispers claimed Lauren understood that better than he did. She knew access, influence, and the ability to move unseen mattered more than a bank balance in a quarterly report. And as investigators closed in, Bezos faced his most painful truth. Maybe it was never about betrayal in the narrow sense. Maybe it was about exposure. About the fact that love had cracked open the armor he had built for decades, turning him from myth into man. And once that image shattered, there was no way back as the world watched the saga reached a fever pitch. The lines between scandal strategy and survival blurred until even those closest to the couple could no longer tell where the truth ended and the performance began. Bezos, the man once defined by algorithms, satellites, and warehouses, now found his every step measured in whispers, headlines, and carefully staged photographs, while Lauren seemed to thrive in the chaos, floating from yacht decks to red carpets to royal banquets, as if each new stage were designed for her alone. And yet behind the glitter there was tension darker than the storm clouds over any Mediterranean horizon. Friends quietly distanced, business partners whispered contingency plans, and rivals circled like sharks in bloodied water. But what made this chapter unlike any other was that it was no longer just about two people tangled in desire or ambition. It was about the shape of power itself, about whether the richest man alive could bend the narrative back to his control, or whether the narrative had already escaped him, carried forward by Lauren, by the press, by the invisible machine that turns private lives into global entertainment. And as days turned into weeks, into months, the spectacle refused to fade. Each twist became fuel, each revelation a spark. And still, the questions hung heavy. Was this love? Was this betrayal? Was this the story of a woman who saw the highest table in existence and refused to sit anywhere else? Or was it simply the oldest story retold with bigger yachts, bigger fortunes, and bigger risks? In the end, no answer satisfied the crowd, because the power of the story was that it never ended. It only lingered in the shadows, in the photographs, in the rumors on the decks of billion-dollar ships where champagne flowed and cameras flashed, and the world kept watching, waiting for the next chapter, waiting for the next scandal, waiting to see whether Jeff Bezos had met his match in Lauren Sanchez, or whether together they had rewritten the very rules of power, love, and survival in the 21st century.
This video covers legal allegations in a news context. All claims are from official filings and no guilt is implied until proven in court. Please keep all discussions respectful. Allegations are not facts until proven in court.